Alright guys, how's it going? Welcome back. Today I'm in a Nissan Juke, which is a car that I detest. Now before we get on to the many reasons why I don't like the Juke, I've got to point out that technically, as a mode of transport, it isn't that bad. I mean, it isn't dangerous, it isn't poorly built, it starts, stops, goes, fine. So now that we've established that, let's get on to the many reasons why I don't like them. First of all, you've got the looks, which are absolutely hideous. From the front end with those goofy headlamps, every time I see one on the road, it reminds me of Stephen Merchant. Now, I like Stephen Merchant, don't get me wrong, he's a very funny man, but I think even he would be the first to admit that you shouldn't really style a car based on his face. From the driver's seat, because of those goofy headlamps, your visibility is greatly reduced. So, because they stick out so far, you just can't see what's going on down there. From the side, it's just gormless looking. It sits quite high, the rear end slopes down awkwardly, the wheels barely fit in the wheel arches. It's just so tragic and hopeless. It sort of looks like a helmet, which coincidentally is what you look like when you drive a Juke. I hate the rear door handles too, I think they're completely pointless. They just don't work. Bear in mind that this car is designed for young families basically. Well, what do young families have by definition? They have young children. When you're 3 feet tall, because you're a young child, you can't reach those rear handles, which makes them utterly pointless. Very clever that Nissan, very clever indeed. Then you get round to the rear, which just looks like a sloppy mess. It looks squashed as if it's been sat on by an elephant. The rear lights are overstyled, the shape just doesn't look nice or appealing in any way. As hard as you try, you just cannot defend the styling of the Nissan Juke. You know when you see some cars on the road that are ugly, like the Fiat Multipla or the Chrysler PT Cruiser, you can defend those because they're full of character and they're also quite practical. Whereas this is none of those things. Inside it feels very cramped and dark and claustrophobic, and there are blind spots everywhere. The windows are quite shallow and they're quite high, so it doesn't allow much light in. You actually feel relieved when you step out of a Juke, because when you're in it you just feel trapped. I mean, who designed it? Josef Fritzl. Then you've got the boot space, which even a borrower would describe as being small. So the young family in question can't fit a pushchair in the back. So I just find myself asking, what's the point? What is the point of the Nissan Juke? Because it doesn't seem to do anything very well. I've been in sports cars which are more practical than this. The Nissan Juke has been around for 10 long, miserable years, and I've noticed that it's only bought by two kinds of buyer. They're very popular amongst the elderly, which is fine, I've got no issues with that, I'm not ageist in any way. Old people like them because of the elevated driving position, so it means when you get in and out of it, it's just that little bit easier if you've got a bad hip. That's fine, it all makes sense. But there are loads of cars better out there that you could have bought. A Dacia Duster, a Ford B or C-Max, a Mercedes B-Class, a Renault Captur. They're all far better than the Nissan Juke. So I just don't know why they don't buy one of those instead. A Skoda Yeti even. All better. Every one of those cars I've just mentioned is better than the Juke in every single way. And if you do have a disability and you've got to get a wheelchair or a scooter in the back, forget it. The second kind of buyer for the Juke is the young mother with the poor credit score. They get suckered in and they end up buying one of these cars from one of those big car supermarket places. You know, the places where they don't actually tell you the price of the car, they tell you the weekly figure, which is available at 77.7% APR, and you end up paying it for all eternity. Those kind of car supermarkets prey on people with bad credit, who frankly should know better but often don't. The young mother, who is usually orange in colour with a mouth like Daffy Duck, she likes them because Chardonnay's mum's got one, and Brooklyn's mum, and everyone else in the school run. So she thinks that because it sort of looks like an SUV, it will be big enough for Jaden, Braden, and O'Caden. By the time you've got a couple of car seats in the back there, there's no room in the middle for anything, let alone a child. Then inevitably the young mother will get knocked up again because there's only so much daytime telly you can watch on the Bright House Plasma. So by the time little baby Harper comes along, the Juke is just no good at all. So everything I've mentioned so far, the poor looks and the impracticality, that's all before we talk about how it drives. The model I'm in today comes with a 1.5 litre turbo diesel engine, which comes straight from Renault. If you ever mooch around the engine compartment, it won't be long before you see the little Diamond of Doom logo, the hallmark of quality. Before I slag this engine off too much, for being a little bit rough, agricultural, they always have that injector knock sort of noise. I've had them in Renaults and Nissan vans with nearly 200,000 miles on that still drive really well. But then also I've had them in Mercedes B-Classes and other little Nissans where the turbo's blown at 60,000 miles. So I suppose it's fair to say, like most French cars, some are very good and some are just awful. Now, if you don't want to go for a diesel, there were a couple of gutless, yet surprisingly thirsty petrol engines. Those engines were quite good at turning petrol into literally nothing at all. The manual gearbox is a little bit notchy. The automatic is a CVT, therefore rubbish. The driving position's cramped. There's nowhere really for your elbow. It's like being in an old Defender. There's not much space inside. It's the exact opposite of bright and airy. The clutch is stupid. The sound system's not very good. The sat-nav screen is minuscule. The reverse camera's tiny. And there's even, which I've just noticed today, which is about as much use as a chocolate teapot, is a button here for driving modes. So you can watch how many G's you're producing in corners. That is literally a waste of a button. I'm not an environmentalist by any means, but that's annoyed me that they've just wasted plastic there with that. Who needs a driving mode button in a Nissan Juke? Unless you go for a top spec model like this, which has got heated leather seats and a leather steering wheel. The cheaper lower end Jukes have this horrible plastic steering wheel which will just rub off in your hand and disintegrate. So it's cramped inside, it's not nice to drive, there's loads of blind spots, there's way more body roll than you'd expect. So I'll ask the question again, what is the point of the Nissan Juke? Although it looks like a high-riding SUV with four-wheel drive, it isn't. It's just front-wheel drive. So because it's taller, heavier, less aerodynamic than a standard hatchback, that also means it's worse on fuel. So just in case you've missed those points so far, it's not as good to drive as a hatchback, it's worse on fuel than a hatchback, and it's not as practical as a hatchback. So what is the point? I just can't figure out why people don't buy a Ford Focus or a VW Golf. They're just better cars in every measurable way. Most hatchbacks look better, they're more stylish, they're more practical, they're better on fuel, they're nicer to drive, and yet people still buy the Nissan Juke. What's truly shocking and worrying in equal measure is that this is one of the best-selling cars of the last decade. I mean, what's wrong with people? Here's a fact for you. Nissan have sold over 1 million Jukes. I mean, what does that tell you? I suppose it's kept a lot of people employed in the northeast, so that's good, I suppose. You know when you see another ugly car on the road, you think, oh, look at that. It's got a face only its mother could love. But then you think, well, at least it's roomy, practical, it's probably alright to drive. But that's just not true of the Juke. It's a hateful, smug-looking thing. It's just got a face that you could punch. So there we are, the Nissan Juke. What's the point? What is the point of the Nissan Juke? I feel better now I've got that off my chest. It's like therapy, this. Oh, by the way, if you're one of those people who has a lock on the outside of the bedroom door, not the inside, and you quite fancy a Nissan Juke, despite everything I've just told you, then you can find the advert on my website. I'll leave the link below. But I wouldn't. Go and buy a B-Class Mercedes, or a Ford Focus, or a Golf, or a Renault Captur, or a Dacia Duster, or a Honda CR-V, or a... The list is endless, honestly. So thanks once again for watching. Make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done already. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. I'll leave the link below. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know and I'll do my best to get back to you. So yeah, cheers guys. I'll see you next time.